Returning to the table, he carefully poured out some of the substance and used a credit card to divide it into 4 thin, pale rails.
You're listening to the latest dose of Bipolar Recorder. This podcast may cause dizziness and blurred vision. Enjoy.
Hey, welcome to Bipolar Recorder. My name is Hunter Keegan. Thanks for deciding to check out this podcast today. The fact that people listen to us share our stories on this show is inspirational and amazing. I can't believe it's already autumn again. October is here and Halloween is right around the corner. October is Bipolar Recorder's birthday month, so be sure to celebrate in some sort of fashion. Honestly, it's my favorite time of year. I love it when people start putting skeletons and occult imagery up in their yards. The leaves on the trees begin to change to deep orange and red. It's a total vibe. Anyhow, this installment of Bipolar Recorder is simply a quick update on what's been going on with the outreach lately. As some of you know, I'm going to be appearing at Penn State University later next week to deliver a couple of presentations about bipolar disorder. I'm really excited about this. I'll be driving all the way from Southern Virginia to Central Pennsylvania. It's going to be a road trip, hopefully one that doesn't get as out of control as my infamous Manic Odyssey from 2015. I've prepared a slideshow and some materials to hand out to the students in attendance. These presentations are for students majoring in psychology, so they're a bit formal in nature, but I hope and plan to present the information in a way that's engaging and also incorporates my experiential knowledge about living with this complex mental health condition. During the presentation, I'm going to dispel some myths and misunderstandings about bipolar. I want to bring more awareness to the reality of what it's like to live with serious mental illness. I also want to show people that it's okay to talk openly about intense, heavy human challenges, such as mania, addiction, and suicidal depression. It's important that we continue fostering dialogue around these difficult topics. It's awful that so many of us feel as though we need to live in the dark and struggle silently. I've been very open about my challenges with addiction and the mistakes I've made over the years, and that seems to have resonated with many people. If you're comfortable in doing so, I encourage you to tell people your story as well. Research from the American Psychiatric Association has shown that when a normal, so to speak, person simply meets or gets to know somebody with mental illness, social stigma and prejudice can be greatly reduced. Sharing stories with one another is a fundamental way that humanity has shaped social knowledge and understanding over the millennia. By engaging in group dialogues about complex psychological issues, we can teach and learn from one another. This opportunity to appear at Penn State is super meaningful to me because I feel like my time as a student there was pretty toxic. I was reckless and irresponsible in those days. If you remember the installment with Paul, that was installment 25 of the show, we talked about how I was a campus resident advisor during my sophomore and junior year at the university. Here are some clips from that installment.
It was a wild ride. You as my RA, so eventually you just started hanging out with us, doing various things, and you joined us at the hookah circle a couple times. I was like, okay.
Yeah, I remember that. Like, we would hang out at night, and you had like this big hookah, and people would all chill out and just kind of shoot the shit or whatever.
I just want to tell you one of your quotes that you said to me freshman year. It's probably not going to make you feel great, but it makes me laugh every time I think about it.
Oh my God, I'm so nervous right now.
I know. So it was me and then the two guys next to us. And we would always like sit and like play video games until like 2 or 3 in the morning. And one time you just like popped in on God knows what. And told us this like wild story. And I'm not going to share the story because it's on recording. And he ran out of the room. And I was like, yo, guys, that's our RA.
Let me be really honest here. I think back to that time in my life with a ton of guilt and regret. I was so wrapped up in self-medicating my undiagnosed bipolar disorder with alcohol and street drugs that I squandered a lot of good professional opportunities and relationships. I was in positions of trust and leadership that I used to hide and enable my self-destructive behavior. At the time, I felt like I was just doing what I had to do, but a decade later, it feels pretty shitty. This is sort of my redemption arc, I guess. It feels like things are coming full circle. Finally, I've found a way to turn my toxic experiences into something that can help others. Maybe listening to my presentation will inspire a student to get help before they wind up in a hospital or morgue. Maybe it'll make someone feel less alone. Or maybe it'll just make someone feel better about how much less of a shit show their own life is. I'm not sure exactly what reactions I'll get. I want to release a proper, in-depth life update installment for the show in the near future. There have been some ups and downs in my life over the last year. I've talked about some of them on Twitter/X Spaces, but there are a lot of podcast listeners who aren't on Spaces, so I want to do an official update on the show. But unfortunately, I'm crunched for time right now. I'm still working on getting my PSU presentation ready and balancing commitments to my day job, as well as working on finishing up another solo musical project. So for this installment, I'm actually going to share something I recorded a little while back. With all this talk of Penn State and my relationship with it, I thought I'd share something special. It's a recording of me reading the first chapter of the upcoming memoir I've been working on. This is still a work in progress and may be subject to change, but I think it encapsulates the wildness that I was associated with during my time at the university. The working title for this memoir is Happy Valleys. Just like the rest of the book, this chapter is R-rated. It involves extended descriptions of drug use and youthful debauchery. Note that I share these stories not to glorify or condone substance abuse, but rather to provide a transparent representation of the questionable days in my life. Here we go.
Happy Valleys, Being Bipolar at Penn State and Beyond. Chapter 1, Death to the Wallflowers. It was nighttime in late August 2012, and the muggy air in the dorm left beads of sweat dripping down my face. My roommate, Michael, tried setting up a small fan by the open window to get our barren 12 by 12 foot room to cool down a bit. We had just started our sophomore semesters at Penn State University, located in a town called State College, Pennsylvania. Some people informally call it Happy Valley. After meeting the previous year, we decided to live together based on our shared proclivity for grunge music and partying. He was a little taller than me, maybe around 6'1", with a long, gangly frame. Curly brown hair fell across his shoulders, spilling onto the black Soundgarden shirt he wore all the time. I wiped the perspiration from my brow with the sleeve of my ragged flannel shirt. "Where the fuck is Kinsey?" I asked, exasperated. We'd been waiting on him for hours. Kinsey was an upperclassman in our dorm who we'd become acquainted with earlier that week. We clicked pretty quickly, and he had offered to bring some beers over that night. My only focus was on acquiring alcohol, and I was getting anxious. It was almost 8 p.m., prime drinking time. "Dude, just relax," Michael said. He sat on a chair next to a wooden milk crate that we'd flipped over and fashioned into a makeshift table. Throughout the week, I'd been scrawling cryptic messages across it with Sharpie, so it'd have some personality. One of the phrases I'd emblazoned on the crate read, "Death to the wallflowers." I wasn't exactly sure what that meant. I stood by the window, staring out into a well-manicured courtyard. Michael looked over at me and asked, "Do you want to do some lines?" "Sure," I said without giving it a second thought. Michael got up from the table and walked to his closet. He produced a tiny baggie of white powder. Returning to the table, he carefully poured out some of the substance and used a credit card to divide it into 4 thin, pale rails. He rolled a dollar bill into a tube between his fingers and bent down to snort some of the stuff. I pulled a chair up next to him and followed suit. Michael had a thing for amphetamines. That was one of the first things I'd learned about him. Personally, I was indifferent to using stimulant drugs. They weren't something that I actively sought out, but I never passed up the opportunity when I stumbled across them. Within a few minutes, we were speeding pretty hard. Michael and I babbled to each other about bands we'd been listening to lately and pontificated on how we planned to spend the rest of the night. Another hour passed, and finally there was a knock at the door. Kinsey. Kinsey sauntered into our room with a backpack slung over his shoulder. He wore an old leather jacket mismatched with basketball shorts. "Howdy, y'all, it's the beer fairy," he proclaimed with a thick southern accent as he unzipped the pack and tossed me a Pabst Blue Ribbon. I caught it and cracked it open. The can erupted with foam that streamed down my hand onto the floor. "Fuck me," I said, chugging what remained of the beer. "Can I get another one?" This time, Kinsey carefully handed me a Pabst, and I was able to open it without incident. "Where have you been, man?" Michael asked. Kinsey's eyes lit up. "Wheelin' and dealin'. Y'all want to see something cool?" "What?" I said as I walked over to my stereo and pulled up some Led Zeppelin. When I turned back to look at him, I saw he'd placed a little tab of paper on the table. Kinsey said something, but I couldn't hear him over the music. "Dude, what?" I said as I sat back down. Kinsey slapped me on the back, then he pointed at the paper. He leaned in close and yelled in my ear, distinctively emphasizing each word. "Do you want to do acid?" I glanced at Michael. He and I had experimented a bit with acid earlier in the summer, but this didn't seem like the right time. It was getting late. I was drinking and speeding. We'd just barely gotten settled into the dorm. But Michael stuck his tongue out at me, displaying a dissolving blotter tab. I snatched the piece of paper Kinsey had left for me, slipped it under my tongue, and was hit with the taste of caustic chemicals, almost like someone had sprayed Lysol into my mouth. "Dudes, there's no way this is real LSD. Lucy is supposed to be tasteless," I said. Kinsey clarified for me. "It's not LSD. It's called 2CE. The fuck is 2CE? "I don't know, but it makes you trip balls, and there's probably not enough of it on that tab to kill you," he assured me. Later, we were all laying on the floor, staring at kaleidoscopic shapes that unfurled across the ceiling. Holographic patterns spiraled around us, and the walls gently pulsed in rhythm with our breathing. That's when Michael whispered, "Do you guys want to go for a walk?" It was a great suggestion. After what seems like forever, we all managed to find our phones, keys, and wallets and stepped out into the Pennsylvania night. Exiting the cramped dorm onto the Twilight University campus with its massive softly lit courtyards and regal academic buildings felt like shifting between worlds. I inhaled through my nose, and as the peaceful air entered my lungs, a nearby tree morphed into the shape of a stag with huge, beautiful antlers that reached endlessly toward the sky. Penn State's campus can be thought of in terms of a small city. It's easy to get lost in for the uninitiated. It's about a 3-mile walk to make it all the way from one end to the other. The freshman students live on the east side, the older students live on the west side, and in between are hundreds of gargantuan libraries, laboratories, and lecture halls. We wandered around for hours. Historic, rustic buildings were interspersed with futuristic, sleek research facilities. I liked watching the orange glow of the streetlights play across the scenery and cast mysterious, dancing shadows. Normally, the campus was crowded with thousands of students, but in the dead of night, it was tranquil and undisturbed. We circled from the east side back to the west side, eventually walking along Burroughs Road, which was in between our dorm and some frat houses. I was trapped in my head, processing an endless stream of scattered introspective thought while trying to stay focused on following my friends who were a few steps ahead of me. Suddenly, someone called out to us from one of the houses. I looked across the street and saw a few frat brothers standing on their front porch talking shit. They were dressed in typical Penn State regalia, white sweatshirts with the navy blue Nittany Lion logo on them. I couldn't make out their faces in the darkness. I just kept walking. I hadn't even caught what was said, but Kinsey did, and a switch had been flipped. He stormed across the street, over their lawn, and right onto their porch. Kinsey bellowed, "Y'all motherfuckers say something!" Everyone was caught off guard, most of all the frat guys. Kinsey kept yelling until someone shoved him off the porch. Michael and I were still watching from the sidewalk as Kinsey got up off the lawn. Other guys from the frat were filtering out of the house to see what was happening. The guy who shoved Kinsey stepped down from the porch yelling, "Get the fuck out of here, bitch!" Kinsey, in a final act of defiance, threw a mean left hook that nearly knocked the dude on his ass. But now, nearly a dozen other guys were rushing into the yard looking for blood. I knew I couldn't let my new homie go down like that. I took a few deep breaths and ran into the chaos, shouting, "Chill, yo, chill!" Doing my best to dodge blows, I wrapped my arms around Kinsey's shoulders and hurriedly dragged him to safety. None of the fraternity followed us. I figured they didn't want to get hit with assault charges if a campus cop happened to be driving by. We made it back to our dorm, a sprawling 4-story brick and mortar structure that housed some 500 other students. Michael and I took Kinsey back to his room. In the bright fluorescent light of the hallway, I could see Kinsey had taken some damage. He had a black eye and his face was all swollen up. We quickly debriefed. You sure you're all right, man?" I asked. "Yeah, I'll live," Kinsey said, shrinking through the doorway into the darkness of his room. "Thanks for saving my ass." With that, Michael and I returned to our own base of operations. Kinsey had left the backpack of beers, so I instinctively grabbed a couple and laid down in my bed. Around sunrise, the 2CE trip had taken on a dirty quality. The visual hallucinations looked grimy, like I was watching an old VHS tape. The taste of the drug was still burnt onto my tongue. I nursed on a beer in hopes that it would settle my stomach. As I tried to ground myself, I felt electric sensations shoot up and down my arms. Then I became hyper-aware that the skin on my fingertips was quite dry and flaky. Our first night of the semester had really exploded. We'd already entered reckless territory with no real regard for the consequences. In those days, it seemed like virtually nothing could go wrong. And even when things did go wrong, Everything seemed to work out all right in the end. I was 19 years old. All I wanted to do was get fucked up and party with my friends. Hangovers and bruises wouldn't deter me. The fuse had been lit, but none of us realized how fast it was burning.
I'm not sure exactly when the manuscript will be complete. I hope to have it done by early 2024, but you never know how things will unfold. In the first half of the book, Happy Valleys heavily focuses on my time at Penn State and explores many facets of living with undiagnosed and untreated mental health issues. If you've read my first memoir, My Brain is Trying to Kill Me, Happy Valleys basically goes into much more detail about some of the things I originally glossed over because I wasn't ready to fully share them back in 2020. The second half of Happy Valleys focuses on my manic episode in 2015 and the ensuing fallout and eventual recovery. If you enjoyed listening to this opening chapter of Happy Valleys, you may be interested in checking out My Brain is Trying to Kill Me, which is available on Amazon in Kindle and paperback formats. It's a quick read about my life with bipolar and some of the crisis situations I've lived through so far. I'll be appearing at Penn State to speak with students on Friday, October 20th. Again, I can't tell you how excited and honored I am to do this. Is there anything about bipolar or substance abuse that you think I should specifically touch on while I'm up at Penn State? Feel free to let me know by reaching out on social media. Bipolar Recorder is on X, previously known as Twitter, at Bipolar Recorder. My personal Twitter/X account is at HH Keegan. Twitter/X is the best source for the latest info about the podcast and other mental health outreach projects I work on. But if you're not on that platform, we also have an account on Instagram at Bipolar Recorder. There you can find some bonus video content if you're into that sort of thing. We're on other apps too, including Mastodon and Wisdom. Look for us. We're not hard to find. Finally, let me quickly mention that we recently introduced a new avenue for outreach, Substack. Substack is a cool subscription service for distributing articles and newsletters. We're using it to send out educational, thought-provoking content, as well as updates about the Bipolar Recorder project. Check out the show notes for a link, or simply search Bipolar Recorder on Substack. I hope you enjoyed this installment. Thank you so much for listening. Have a lovely day, evening, or night, wherever you are.
Bipolar Recorder is a listener-supported show. To help keep the show running, consider checking out our Patreon page or visiting bipolarrecorder.com.
Unless otherwise stated, the hosts and guests on Bipolar Recorder are not licensed mental health professionals. Bipolar Recorder is not a substitute for therapy or professional medical intervention. If you are having a mental health crisis, please contact your local emergency services.